In this episode, we're exploring the life model concept of suffering well. We're going to cover three things. First, what suffering well actually is. Second, what happens when this capacity is missing in our lives and our clients' lives. And third, how to apply this concept in our personal and professional lives. If you're new here, I'm Monica with CFT Institute. We train therapists, counselors, and spiritual leaders in a framework approach that combines neuroscience with faith. So let's dive in. What is suffering well? Well, in order to understand what suffering well is, we need to first understand what trauma is. And as clinicians, many of us are very familiar with the concept of trauma. I remember interviewing a candidate to come on our team here at our Davidson, North Carolina Center for Family Transformation office. And I have a plethora of questions that I ask potential candidates who are looking to join a team of therapists. And as I was asking questions to this one candidate, she said, I'm not really interested in doing therapy with people who have trauma. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. I think I even asked her point blank, like, what do you mean? I don't think that is possible. I think all of us have trauma. And so it's impossible to think about being a therapist without helping people overcome and face the traumas in their lives. And so from a life model perspective, this model that blends faith and neuroscience, from this perspective, trauma is any time that we're alone and in pain. So just because something may not be traumatic to one person, it doesn't mean it's not traumatic to another person. In my early years as a therapist, my colleagues and I would kind of chuckle to ourselves when someone would say, I don't have a lot of trauma in my life. Or we would explain to our clients, as therapists, we call a lot of things trauma that you might not think of as traumatic, because trauma is the matter of being alone when you're in the pain that you're feeling. And so whether it's, I got a poor grade on a test, or I was abused dramatically and intensively from a caregiver, both of those things can be considered traumatic, depending on the presence of a benevolent other in the life of the child or the adult who's experiencing that. We all need attachment. And when we have that secure attachment, we can go through life's difficulties with less impact. But when we don't have secure attachment, when the people who are around us, our primary caregivers, mother, father, or our spouse or good friends, are not actually able to share our pain with us when we're in pain, we will be traumatized when the events of life come our way. So it's not about the type or intensity that makes something traumatic. It's the fact that we are alone and in that pain. So as we dig deeper into the life model concept, which is based in the science, we understand that in order for us to not be traumatized, we need to be able to be connected to someone. And if we are connected to someone in pain, that pain will actually produce wisdom for us in life. Dr. Carl Lehman talks about the pain processing pathway and how we metabolize pain. When we metabolize pain, it produces wisdom for us. But the key to metabolizing pain is that we have to feel it and remain attached to someone who cares for us and who can accurately and tenderly understand what we are going through. That is a profound and clear concept. There's no way around it. This is what we need. We need attachment. We need community. We need someone who can meet us. And so often our parents do their very best, but they can't meet us because they haven't dealt with their own traumas. And in order to really reach out and be there for another, in order to share pain, in order to empathize, truly empathize, and we have to be able to connect to something within us that understands what that may be like. And so often what we experience other than that is a parent, a caregiver, a friend, a spouse saying, oh, I can understand what you're going through, but not really connect to it, or go right past any type of validation or empathy into problem solving, into giving us the answers to what we should do in any given situation. And that is so invalidating. When someone tries to provide comfort before they provide attunement, we feel invalidated, we feel unseen, unknown, we feel lost and alone. So even though there could be people around, and well-intentioned people at that, even though there may be people around when these hard times come, if we don't feel connected to those people, we will be traumatized. We will develop a trauma disorder. We will develop PTSD from the things that we go through because we need others. So that brings us back to the concept of, what does it mean to suffer well? What it means to suffer well is that life events happen, the difficulties happen, no matter the type and intensity. And when those things happen, I know I'm not alone. And because of that, I can stay connected to who I truly am in my true identity. And sometimes people can't do that. Sometimes people don't have the maturity capacity. They haven't done the work themselves, so they can't stay connected. But God can. God can always connect to us. God is the perfect attachment figure. And when people fail us, when people don't have the capacity to remain present with us when we're hurting, we can always find a foundational source of attachment with God. And so as mental health professionals, we want to be the attachment figure for our clients, no matter what they're going through. It's so important for us to go where we need to go in our own personal trauma healing in order to be able to go to the depths with those who come into our office. And when we find that a client's issues are beyond our capacity because their trauma, their pain is so amplifying to our nervous systems that we shut down, that we don't show up in our window of tolerance, then what we can do is we can cry out to God and say, God, help me to find my way to connect with this person individually. And remember, if you haven't thought about this lately, go back to some of our previous podcasts or even our trainings, and you can learn more about this concept of identity. But many of you will have a familiarity to this. And the concept goes, we don't know ourselves except through the lens of another. So the mirror neurons in our brain only allow us to see ourselves if we are with another person. So literally we can look in the mirror and say, who is that? But when I'm with an attachment figure, someone who I feel secure attachment with, I begin to understand what it means to be me. What are the character qualities that I contain? What are the unique essences of who I am in the world that makes me a unique individual? I can't know that outside of relationship with others. It takes more than just me as an individual to understand who I am in relationship. And so when we come to the concept of suffering well, it's impossible to understand it outside of the lens of trauma and true identity. Because to suffer well means that I am not being traumatized. I am staying connected to God or another safe, secure attachment figure or a group of people. And that as I'm staying connected, I am reminded about who I am, and I'm able to show up, even in pain, like my true self. So here's an example. Let's take COVID, for example. You know, when everything started going down, I remember that just being such a scary time for us all. We didn't understand people were getting sick. And then we heard about respirators and people dying in the hospital, dying at home and having to isolate. And it was a very, very scary time. And many of us were amplified in our distress and we were feeling alone in that. So what we did was we hid and we isolated, or we raged and we blamed and got sad or anxious. Whatever we did, if it wasn't showing up like our core selves, then we weren't suffering well. We were being traumatized by that experience. But let's just say that some of us, instead of being traumatized, we stayed connected to, hey, how can I help in this pandemic? What can I do to be present with myself and present with others? How can I stay grounded in my true sense of self, even though I'm scared and even though I'm confused and I don't really understand what's going on, or maybe I'm even angry? I'm staying connected in my true self and able to navigate the complexities of the situation while maintaining my character qualities, my sanctification, my sense of who I am in Christ. So that's the answer to the what is suffering well. But let's now talk more about what happens when we don't suffer well, when that's missing in our lives, when we're not able to stay connected and intense things that come our way. I remember thinking maybe about 8 years ago, sitting in a counseling office, I was talking with someone and it just came into my awareness. Everyone has trauma. Everyone has pain. And I think that I, quote unquote, knew that, of course, in a left brain kind of way. But I think in my mind, up till that point, I was almost comparing people's pain one to another and thinking, oh, well, this person is in more pain, or this person has less pain, or this person's life is more perfect and this person's life is more complicated and traumatizing. And I'm definitely not saying that there aren't major life difficulties and traumas that reach some people, homelessness, rape, murder, tragic deaths. Yes, yes, yes. And none of us is exempt from suffering. Each of us, no matter who we had sit down on that couch in our clinical offices, we would be able to talk about the story of their pain. Everyone has acute and sincere pain. Money doesn't take it away. Relationships don't take it away. We all have an opportunity to face difficulty and learn how to suffer well. And of course, having primary attachment figures who provide secure attachment in our infancy and childhood set us up for more joy in life. But when we are not able to suffer well, it has to do with a couple of things, at least. But not having primary caregivers who shared or could create joy and help our brains develop joyful identity really does impact and hinder our ability to connect to others when we have difficulty, because we either learn to be anxious and codependent with others and overcompensate that attachment relationship, or we learn to isolate and shut down. And when we do one or the other of those, or both, and have more of a disorganized form of attachment, it's hard to, as an adult, learn how to suffer well, because we have some hardwired ways of coping that prevent our ability to attach well. And we have to rewire those attachment places and really, like Dan Siegel would say, earn secure attachment with another, God and or others. And that is our primary way to join into an ability to suffer well. I think also there are certain things that in life that exceed our capacity. And when those things happen, we may be able to suffer well up to a certain point. But when those things happen, it provides a real challenge to us to be able to suffer well, because it's exceeded the capacity that we've already grown. Dr. Wilder talks about the idea of climbing Joy Mountain, that a baby, when a baby's developing the amount of joy capacity that that baby is going to be able to have throughout their life, they need to be able to exceed that by climbing a mountain that increases the capacity for more joy, so that we can actually literally fill up a joy tank in our body, so that when difficult times come, we have excess reserves, that even when these difficulties come and kind of steal some of our joy, we have excess, we have extra, we have reserves. When we don't have those reserves, or we don't have the capacity to fill up our tank enough during joyful times, and then something hard comes, it steals our joy. It steals what we have in reserve. It steals what we were able to fill ourselves up with. And we aren't able to suffer well, because the pain has exceeded now our capacity to find a way to stay in our window of tolerance, or stay in a place of resiliency and act like the person we know we are. So that's when we go into more of the fight or flight, or the complete shutdown. So we'll go into hyperarousal, hypoarousal. And that's really what it looks like when it's missing. When we're not able to suffer well because of all these dynamics in terms of trauma, in terms of attachment, then we don't act like ourselves. And we all have a unique way of doing that, but it's unique to us, and it's familiar to us, and it's familiar to those around us. It's like, okay, here's my spouse in their angry fit again, or here's my child and when they shut down, or here's my brother or sister or mother or father or neighbor or friend or colleague. And this is how they act when their capacity is exceeded. And so that brings us now to the concept of how to apply this. Like, what do we want to do? How do we want to become people who suffer well? And I love how Life Model puts it. They say, as Christians, we are a people who are called to suffer well. We saw Christ on the cross and how he suffered well for the pain set before him. He endured the cross. He didn't want to go there, but he did, because he loves us, and he knew that sacrifice would do something so powerful, so profound for us in giving us an open door, tearing the veil, so that we can come into communion and intimate relationship with God. So Jesus was willing to do the hard thing, to suffer well, to endure hardship, in order that we can know God and walk with God. So we are to be a people who suffer well. Life is never going to be easy. It's never going to be perfect. We aren't just going to get through the one hard thing and get out of it into an easy, peaceful life. There will be good, and there will also be difficulty. So how do we learn to suffer well? Well, we have to, as counselors, as Christians, and just as humans, learn to expand our capacity for joy, so that we can fill up our joy tanks. We have to learn what those ways of filling our joy tank are. How do we stay connected to God and others, and actually strategically build joy with them, so when difficulties come, we have those reserves. And we also have to be cultivating strong attachment bonds with God and others, so that when difficulty comes and we have that pain, we don't go to our beeps. We don't go to our compulsions or addictions. We go to the attachment, and we pour out our heart, and we receive attunement and validation in that pain. And as we are attuned to and validated, the pain goes through the processing pathway, and every difficulty then produces wisdom. That is how we can be joyful in all circumstances. That is how we can, even in trial and hardship, look at the testing of our faith as something that is purposeful, And then that perseverance can develop character, and character can develop hope, like the word says. And so this concept of suffering well brings the word to life. This is what it is for us to apply this in our lives personally and professionally. If we're not doing it personally, how are we going to be able to help our clients do it? But this is how we don't waste our triggers. We don't waste our traumas. We don't waste the difficulties in life. We don't even waste the difficulty in relationship. It's never hopeless. There's always a redemptive plan involved with every difficulty. If we can grow through it, it's the transformation zone. It truly produces more maturity in us. And maturity says, the actual definition of maturity is that I can act like myself in increasingly difficult situations, aka suffer well. So thanks so much for tuning in today. If you want to go deeper with the life model and these 30 core concepts, we have a full series of training available at CFT Institute. You can start exploring for free at www.cftinstitute.com. And we'll see you in the next episode. Remember, healing spreads when counselors live in joy.